Hey, Howard.
Hey, Sean.
So in the law enforcement world, there are, I don't know, probably two of the most well-known agencies that are out there.
Is one of them the Hogeye Police Department in Hogeye, Arkansas?
That is a negative. That is a big negative. Neither is Tulsa Police Department, where I'm from. But one of them is on the East Coast. It's a lot of TV time, NYPD. One of them's out there on the West Coast, the LAPD.
Do we have Eric Estrada on today?
We do not have Poncherello on here, nor John, his partner.
Okay. Well,
Mary 183 or something like that, or whatever it was.
Adam 12, see the man.
But we do have a retired LAPD officer on here with us today. Actually worked in homicide.
I think there's probably quite a few murders in LA.
There is, and anybody paying attention to the news right now, LA, like many other large cities, it's actually shooting up quite a bit over this last year. But he was there for quite a while. Worked there during the busy times of LA. Let's just put it that way. He was involved in a lot of different cases. Really, really fortunate to have him on here today. Today we have got retired LAPD officer Greg Kading with us.
Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Hey, gentlemen.
Greg, thanks for being here with us. But before we jump into hearing some of your stories, some of your Coptales, part of Coptales and Cocktails
is cocktails.
Cocktails.
If we don't have cocktails, we're not nearly as interested. It enhances our personalities.
That it does. So as we can see there, you've already you're sipping on something. So we got to play a little catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you sipping on?
So this is a bullet bourbon old fashioned.
Well,
and I'm just starting to figure out exactly how to make these right. But there's a really good old fashioned and there's just old fashions. And so
right.
I'm trying to get that nuance.
Very true. I like that backdrop, by the way, man. Where'd you pick that up at? Where'd you get that flag?
This behind me?
Yes, sir.
I built that. I built it out of planks of wood, and this is just a piece of plywood, and these planks are just old barn wood.
Nice.
And, I just stained it, and then I got these little stars off of Amazon. I made a big. It's like an 8 by 20 foot flag.
That's patriotic, sir.
It is. Yeah, I like that, man. That's beautiful. So, Howard, what are we going to sip on here today? He's got old fashioned. What are we jumping into?
Yeah, well, I was out in Reno doing the nursing thing, and I got the opportunity to go over to a place called Napa, which is known for wine. So, of course, I bought bourbon instead.
Absolutely.
So I bought this bourbon called Burning Chair, and its claim to fame is that it has been aged inside a Zinfandel and Cabernet barrels to give it a more sophisticated taste to the corn wine.
How fancy.
So that's what we're going to drink today. I don't know how it tastes. I haven't had it before. I'm sure that it's going to be delicious. But on Coptales and Cocktails, we're always drinking stuff. I'm guarantee it's better than Apple Crown.
Anything is better than Apple Crown. So, Greg, before we jump into this, cheers to you and in your career, and we appreciate you being here with us.
Cheers.
Absolutely. Cheers, guys. What is it called? Burning Chair?
Yeah.
It gives them burns your nose hairs. I'll tell you that. Wow.
Burning hair.
Yeah, burning hair. Stick to wine, Napa. Stick to wine.
They don't need to do that.
They don't need to get into the bourbon business. I'll tell you that.
That's a fucking hate crime.
Oh, where's that Apple Crown?
Yeah, where is that? Hey, Quincy, come here.
Yeah. All right. So Greg, man, we're kind of going at this cold. Usually we have a little bit of a background of who we're chatting with. I was eager to get you on. You're a very, very busy man, despite being in retirement. So man, we're just going to shoot this from the hip. Now listen, I will say this for the listeners out there, Greg was involved, if I'm correct, and I'm going to say it, we're not going to talk about it, but he was involved with both the Biggie Smalls and Tupac murders back there, but he has talked about those numerous times. There's documentaries, there's television shows, there's podcasts and so forth. And being an LAPD homicide detective, he has got countless stories that he could share with us. So we're going to jump into something different.
So how'd you get into policing, sir?
Well, I was a wayward teenager and I didn't have a whole lot of direction going on. And I had a friend of mine whose father was the head of my Pop Warner football team, or the Pop Warner football team I was on. And me and this kid were really close friends, and his dad, who was the coach, was actually an Orange County sergeant at the time. And he kind of mentored me because he wanted to make sure that the person his son was hanging out with, had some kind of, shit going for him. And so I kind of slowly didn't have much of a father figure in my life. He became that guy, became a mentor, and slowly kind of guided me towards a career in law enforcement. He said, Greg, you haven't fucked up too bad yet, but I can see that that's potentially going to happen. And at that point in time, you'll disqualify yourself from any opportunities, such as going into law enforcement. So I was 20 years old. I went down and applied for the Orange County Sheriff's Department and went through the process. They didn't catch everything, so I made it through completely. and the rest is history. I started my career.
So you started off as a beat cop, I assume, because I'm learning a lot about this because I'm not one of the chosen ones. I'm just a lowly nurse.
He wouldn't pass, Greg. I promise. He couldn't get in with this.
What's that thing that you get googly?
Yeah. Giglioed?
Giglioed, yeah.
He likes to throw that term out there.
Yeah, giglioed. I'm learning cop slang, which for our listeners means that you can't say anything that's untrue.
No, it basically means there's just been a ruling in the court that your testimony is not truthful, essentially. And that's that something in your job description, whether you've been untruthful or you have knowledge about something improper that happened, you didn't speak for, and they can giggle you in court. But anyway, so Greg, let me ask you this, man. Kind of like myself, I grew up in the Bay Area, and I ran around with a bunch of guys that got in trouble as well. But I have always thought this, that kind of growing up that way, not saying I was an angel, but it made me a better cop than cops that I've seen on the police department that kind of come from, these squeaky clean backgrounds, have no understanding, I guess, the way the streets kind of work and, what it's like dealing with bad guys day to day. And you having that type of perspective, you don't fuck around with the little stuff. The little crimes and stuff like that are kind of petty, and you don't mess with it. You're kind of looking for the bigger, badder, worse type things. That's something you agree with?
Absolutely, 100%. I think it helps you to kind of keep things in a more balanced perspective. I grew up, kids around me were doing dope. I was a pothead, and so I think as you're referring to, as I got out on the streets, I catch a kid with a bag of weed. I'm not going to I'm not going to disrupt his life so much. I'm going to take the weed from him, do what I've got to do. But I'm keeping things in perspective. I think there's other people that come from much more, how would you say, just more refined backgrounds, maybe. And they only see things as black and white, right and wrong. And they don't really, I don't think, have a full appreciation for the gray area in between. And sometimes I think that does make us more effective cops.
Couldn't agree more. And I apologize. You said you worked for Orange County. Now, did you go on to work for LAPD, or that information on my part wrong?
Yeah, well, to ours point, I started off, most guys don't start in the beat. If you're with a sheriff's department, you start in the county jail.
Oh, really?
Because of course, because the sheriff's departments are in charge of the jails in the county. And so you go in, and it's really, I think it's one of the most important. I think it should be the way it is for all police departments, because I'm 20 and a half years old when I start. I graduate, I'm 21 from the academy, and now I'm going into, on the streets, I'm still a kid. I still think like a kid. I'm immature like a kid. I just don't have real life experience that will equip me with dealing with other people's real life problems. You get into the jail for a couple of years, and now you're in the criminal element, but it's controlled. And but you're getting to operate, and get in an atmosphere where you can learn how to conduct yourself in that environment. And then you can get out and start dealing with real world problems where things aren't controlled.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It also helps you with, I don't understand gang vernacular a lot of times. Sean will tell me something. What was that car that had the big tires? It was called a donk?
Oh, a donk. Yeah, we were driving down here to the little studio, and there was a donk, an old school Crown Vic with, some like 22-inch rims on it.
Big. He looked like a monster truck. He called that a donk, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And I
Isn't that interesting? it's like language is very regional too. Like you would never hear that as gang vernacular out here. No one would know what the fuck a donkey is.
Yeah, I know it's a Southern term. They use it big down in like Atlanta and Florida and stuff like that. Well, you know, I'd been out there several times in LA, and so the sheriff's department, LASD, is like our sister agency. We send a lot of guys out there for training, particularly for gang schools and things like that, pretty much on a yearly basis from Tulsa. And so every time we go out there, we hop in the car and ride around with the guys. Well, before all the gang units were disbanded, but we'd ride around out there with those guys. And, you know, the different terms we had for guns compared to, you know, everybody knows like gat and stuff like that. But I think when I was out there at the time in Tulsa, everybody were calling them thumps. And that was a street term for gun, a thump. And the guys that I was riding with in LA, they had never heard that one. And so it's kind of funny, you know, the difference in one jurisdiction to another.
What do you call a gun in LA?
We typically like straps.
Yeah.
You strapped, you know.
Yeah.
That was one of the popular terms. Yeah. A gat. You got a gat?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, you know what? I totally digressed. And I think I'm only had half of this cocktail, and I realized I didn't even answer your question. So after a couple of years in the jail, I decided I wanted to go work in LA, and that's when I applied up there and then shifted departments. So just to tie that up, because I think I was misleading. You're introducing me as an LA guy, and I'm talking about Orange County.
No, you're good. How long were you actually with LA?
23 years.
And and then how long over at the Orange County?
Just under 3.
So you put in a good 26.
That's longer than you.
Yeah.
No, that's a good career.
It is
It is longer than mine. I just retired and I was just under 25. So
you're right.
You got me beat, man. Just another thing you're better.
I was just
LAPD's better at me about.
Poking him.
I think 25 is the perfect number, to be honest with you. I think anything beyond that, you start getting into that, I don't know how your guys' retirement systems out here, they entice you to stay until you're nearly dead. But it's just, then guys leave the job after 35 years on, and they've got no retirement because they're dead in, 5 years. That's
it. We've talked about that before. Yeah, and I think I'm repeating it, but I read somewhere just recently, like the average officer, here in the U.S. after a full retirement dies like within 12 years or something. I mean, I think that's like the national average, and that's why our pension systems are so good, because we put money in them for 30, 35 years, and you're only drawing out of it for 12. So I myself, like you, I'm looking forward to this the second half of life.
I'm making an earnest commitment to get exactly as much time out of my retirement as I did.
There you go.
Absolutely. Good for you.
So you went to LA, you worked up through the system and you became a homicide detective. Is that what I'm understanding? I'm going back. The only thing I know about cops is that this one's got white hair and there's a lot of them on TV, and I've watched a lot of shows. I really like The Wire. I thought The Wire, we agree, The Wire is awesome. But so how long were you on the force before you became a detective?
About 10 years. I came up through, after leaving Orange County, getting out of the jails, I started as just a patrol cop. I obviously had a training officer that first year. We call it, your probation period. We call it you're a boot. That's our terminology for a probationer. You're a boot. And so after a year, then you start working with a regular beat partner. And quickly, I think I only did that for just over a year. And then I started getting into gang investigations. And back in the 80s, we had what was known as a crash unit. Mm-hmm. And it's an acronym for this ridiculous thing called Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. And but it sounds cool when it's just hoodlums. It sounds cool when it's just crash. But then when you sound it out, you're like, okay, not so cool. But we were an anti-gang unit. And in the 80s and 90s, obviously, gangs were just out of fucking control. Am I swearing on your show?
You're good to go. This isn't.
Okay. You are swearing on our show, but it's fucking okay.
So I, LA was just fireworks of gangs. And so I got into that and started to develop some expertise in gang investigations, and then went into narcotics, and then went into homicide.
So tell us some stories from homicide. That's what that's what sensationalized a lot. You see headlines, you don't see a lot of people talking about, a prostitution ring broken up. It's always about murders. Yeah. And obviously you worked on some high profile murders, correct?
So, yeah, I think I had a little bit of it's kind of a weird journey for me. When I was in the jail down in Orange County, I was in charge or working a cell block where we had Richard Ramirez, who was the Night Stalker.
No shit.
Really?
So yeah, you would see this guy every day, and you'd see he's a completely different individual, you know, when he's in his cell in an environment where he's vulnerable versus when he's out in the courtroom putting his hand up with his, you know, pentagram on it and acting tough. You know, he's actually just an absolute coward.
Hey, tell us a little bit for our listeners that don't know who the Night Stalker is. I mean, we're a little bit older, so we know who the Night Stalker is.
Yeah.
Let them know who the Night Stalker was, because he terrorized pretty much America.
Yeah, he was a guy, a Hispanic guy down in Southern California that was roaming around and doing these late night home invasions. And he had kind of a pattern. He would find houses in areas where it's close to the freeway, typically one-story houses. He would just go creep until he found somebody with an open door, and he would go in there and either execute the occupants of the house or leave them alive for a while before he killed them. But he would just do these really heinous things, and it just struck fear throughout all of Southern California. And it took a long time to, you know, figure out who he was and why he was doing what he was doing. And then one day after they identified him and put out a flyer, man, some East LA Mexicans noticed him on the street, chased him down and beat the living hell out of him.
No shit.
Yeah. So the public arrested him. Basically, the public identified him and caught him, and the cops came to his rescue.
Yeah.
Neighborhood watch at its finest, huh?
Exactly.
How many people did he end up killing?
I don't know that they ever I don't think they charged him with all the ones that they suspect he did. So I think he went for 11.
Oh man, that's enough.
Yeah.
One's plenty, right? 11 is overkill. No pun intended.
There's a fantastic documentary out right now that kind of goes over the whole case. It's really, really well done on Netflix, called The Night Stalker. I think it's called The Night Stalker, but you'd find it if you're looking for it.
Well, because we have the beauty of the internet and anyone can see me, I've got my reading glasses on, but I just had to look him up. He was convicted for 13 counts of murder, so a baker's dozen. 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 counts of sexual assault, and 14 counts of burglary. It was given 19 death sentences.
He's a bad guy.
Yep.
Bad guy.
Horrible guy.
So tell us some other cases that you worked on that you were actually tracking some people down I want to hear the ones you're the most proud of, you know, the ones that you're like, this guy thought he got away with something, but he didn't, because I got his ass.
Well, can I tell you the one that just bothers me the most?
Hell yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So this guy a guy named Robert, that's the victim's name. This is a really terrible case where this guy is a professor at the LA Community College. He was a language professor. And he had been in a lifelong relationship with his life partner, and his life partner died. And then Robert became very promiscuous out in the gay community. And Robert picked up a guy at a bar one night and ended up taking him back to his house. And then Robert never showed up for work for 3 days. So work called his family and said, hey, we don't know what's happening. Robert hadn't showed for work. Can you go over there and do a welfare check? So his brother goes over to the house and looks around. Robert's car's gone. So he's assuming maybe he just left town, but there's lights on, and he doesn't have a key to the house. So he calls the police department to come over and do what we call a welfare check. Cops get there, and there's just a faint glow, very dark house. Even though it's daylight, it was very dark. All the shades are drawn. And the cops open the front, they force open the front door. They enter the foyer. They look over into the living room area, and it's very dark. They're not actually sure what they're seeing because it's very ambient light. And they see a nude male on his knees with his head and his arms in the couch, like almost in a praying position, with his head and arms, shoulders in the cushion of the couch, his knees on the floor, completely naked, and like about a 12-inch butcher knife in his back. And then standing over him is this huge white guy who's dressed in nothing but a pair of tight shorts, and he's bald-headed, and he's just standing right over the victim. And the first cop is like, free, mother, freeze, and not exactly sure what they got. They see that there's a guy with a butcher knife in his back, and they're yelling at this guy, and he's not complying. He's just standing there looking at him with like this hard stare. And again, the lighting's low. They don't exactly know, but they just know this guy won't cooperate. And, so after, a couple of seconds, they get their flashlights on him, and they recognize that it's this life-size cutout of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Really?
What?
Oh,
wow.
It's one of those.
It's been placed right over the guy.
just to guard him, I guess.
Yeah. So we're trying to figure out what, so obviously it's a homicide investigation. We roll out there, and there's like some cigarette packages thrown about. There's 2 glasses of what we think are Cokes on the counter. One's drank, one's looks like it hasn't been touched. Anyways, processing the scene. And he's been in there for 3 days, tons of lividity, like his whole entire,
He's sloughing,
yeah. He's like
All of
nutsacks
it.
on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the cop was like, literally, detective, I was like a half a pound off of pulling that trigger. I was gonna dump
Shoot
him.
a cutout. Hey, you don't get in trouble for shooting cardboard cutouts. That's nobody cares. Even if it's Stone, but I mean, Stone Cold might come after you a little bit. No one take that.
Right. So ultimately, it ends up he picked up a guy at a bar, and that guy took advantage of him, took him home, robbed him, killed him, took his car, stole his car. That's why it was gone. It took us months actually to track down the suspect, and it was through a prostitute who had bought the car off of him. And
Really?
we had heard, we got a tip that there's a prostitute. Her name was Lickalicious.
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 I want.
Lickalicious.
Look at our lickalicious. It's right here.
we tracked down Lickalicious, and she's like, yeah, I got the car. I got it from Ronnie. It's like, okay, what's Ronnie look like? Oh, he's big, tall, African-American guy. He's come down here to the neighborhood all the time. And so we're trying to figure out who Ronnie is. That's all she knows about him.
Right.
And we go through what we call our field interview cards, months and months and months of field interview cards of everybody that's been stopped in that area. And we come across a guy named Edward Ronald. I won't say his last name.
Sure.
And so we go back and we're like, what did you say his name is? She goes, yeah, I don't know. His name was Ronnie, but I think I heard people calling him Eddie too. So we show her a picture of Ronald Edward, and she's like, that's him. So go back to the crime scene. On the coffee table where the victim was one of those old yellow Instamatic Kodak cameras.
Uh-huh.
Oh, the little windy wheel on it. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Little windy wheel on it. So we had obviously that processed. The very last picture in that roll of film is this African-American guy laying on the victim's bed, but it's only from the neck down. That's the only picture. All you see is the picture from the neck down. You don't see anything other than his.
Everything.
Everything. Yeah. So you don't see his head.
That's called a nude.
That's a nude. It was before selfies though, so we knew the victim had taken it on his camera.
We need to tell people we used to take pictures and then we'd have to have them processed and then we could look at them back in the good old days.
That's right.
Right. We had to send it to the lab and have them develop the film. So
you could get it in an hour.
Yeah. You used to be able to, huh? The drive up.
Yeah.
Yep.
1 hour. That's quick.
Before that, if you really needed an instant photo, you had the Polaroid.
The old shake it like a Polaroid picture. That's it.
Yep.
All right. So you get the picture. He's no facial shot.
Yeah, no facial. She's given us this ID. She says that's where she got the car. So we get the car traced back to the victim. She's describing the guy, matches the guy that's in this photograph without a head. And we're now on the hunt for Ronald Edward. And so this was really strange. Okay, so I won't get to that. We finally track him down. We go to his house. His wife's the only one there. We ask her where he's at. He's not home. We show her the picture, and she says, "That's my Ronnie." And where's he at in that picture? It's like, well, that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's identifying the photograph as her husband. So of course we're going through the process, getting our warrants, searching the place and this and that. And we finally arrest him, and I take him down to our photo lab and have him strip naked. And we're going to photograph his body so that we can make these side-by-side comparisons of the picture. And then we realized, like, in the one thing in the picture, everything was like really good, except the one thing in the picture was that he was uncircumcised.
Oh,
no, the other way around. So in the photograph, he's circumcised. In real life, he wasn't. So we're standing there getting his photographs. And I'm like, well, there's a whole disconnect here, man. Everything matches perfectly. We got the girl, we got the ID, we got the wife, we got the photograph, we got the cars. Like, this is a no-brainer. But there's a problem with this. We can't connect.
Maybe it's his winter attire. Everybody needs a turtleneck.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
just so I understand, in the photo, he's not circumcised,
but in real life, he is.
But in real life, he is, right? Okay.
Yes.
So he had a little surgery done late in life.
So I'm trying to figure it out. I'm like, I know this is the right guy, but this is going to be a problem for us in court. And fortunately, there was an assistant over the DA's office. We're sitting there like, we're just dumbfounded. Like, wait a second, we've got to figure this out. There's not enough time for surgery. Obviously, this all happened relatively quick. And she goes, well, you guys are idiots. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? She goes, well, clearly in the photograph where he's laying on the bed, he had just had sex and it like hadn't retracted yet. And we're like, oh, it's just that easy. It's just that simple.
Well, what can
okay, whoa. So in the photo, he was uncircumcised.
Right.
So
did I switch that around?
No, you said it right. I just repeat it. So in the photo, he's not circumcised. In the meeting him in person for the photo shoot, essentially, he is circumcised.
No, it's the opposite.
I mean, he is not. Yes, I'm with you now. I'm with you now.
I'm a nurse, so I've seen a lot of penises. This is my penis hand right here. This is part of my job. I take care of this. I understand this. But the question I don't understand is I was wondering, I was going to ask you what penal code you were going to charge. I wasn't sure what was going on there. I was going a completely different way with it.
It was penal code 7.5.
That's right.
Around or late.
So did you, what ended up happening to this fine gentleman?
We prosecuted him, and he ended up connecting him to another murder. And so the reason the whole thing kind of got really weird, and why I look back on it, he had this incredibly kind, the victim's family was just distraught from the loss of, whether brother, dad, right, uncle, but not dad, obviously. And in trial, there was an argument made that the photo never became a problem. It all became about racial issues and framing an innocent guy, and the wife's testimony was struck. All these things happened, and he ended up not getting convicted.
Oh,
he was not convicted?
He was not convicted. No. Oh, this is why this bugs me so bad. Okay, now the second photograph before on that roll of film, on the roll of film, we develop it all. The last photograph is Ronnie laying there. There's another photograph, and they're just taking a picture of something on the bed. I think it was like it was a wallet. That's what it was. There was a wallet taken, and on that photograph, you can clearly see sitting on the bed was pubic hair.
Oh.
And by the time we realized that in the photograph, we had already cleared the scene.
And it was gone.
It was gone. So we went back as soon as we figured it out, and the family of our victim was like, oh no, we've taken all of that to the dry cleaners. Everything's gone. We lost, because that would have been the physical evidence.
Yep.
That would have absolutely convicted him. That was my big regret, is that we failed to see that when we were taking the photograph. We didn't see it until,
hey, Greg,
it was just bad crime scene processing.
No, and that happens. I mean, it does. What year was that?
That was 98, I think.
Okay. So, I mean, I just had a trial actually just a few weeks ago when we were just going off of witness testimony, victim testimony. He had known a guy for like 20 something years that shot him. And we had no physical evidence. We had no DNA, nothing like that tied him to it. It was just victim testimony. And the jury ultimately wouldn't convict just off of that, despite them knowing each other, 20 something years. And just as you're talking right there, not having that physical evidence, specifically DNA related stuff, I think because of TV shows, movies, hearing about innocent people that are convicted, that DNA later exonerates them and stuff like that. Juries now, it is very, very difficult to get convictions of stuff without that type of evidence. It is. It's just tough. And it's you're talking something that happened, 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, and it's still hard as it's even harder now.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Hey, one of the cases that I think that you worked on was, like, I guess the best way to say it was a cop that lost his fucking mind and went around on a killing spree, right?
He was he was a disgruntled ex-cop that went on a killing spree. His name was Christopher Dorner.
Now, did you work on that, or did that happen? Were you part of that investigation, or was that after your time on?
It was after my time on. So what had happened, I did this documentary just last year or recently called The Cecil Hotel, Haunting of the Cecil Hotel. It's about this girl that disappears in a water tank, and it's a Netflix thing. And she ended up disappearing. They find her in the water tank, and turns out that, she was having a psychotic breakdown. Anyways, at that exact time that her investigation was going on, this big shooting spree took off in Los Angeles. And it really distracted from her investigation because all of our resources at LAPD were immediately reallocated towards this ongoing manhunt for an ex-LAPD guy who was on a shooting rampage. And so that interested, when I did that documentary, I'm like, damn, nobody's ever really done that story on Christopher Dorner. So I then made the effort to go and I locate the actual investigators that worked on it. And I found a guy that works out here in San Bernardino named Mo. He's still on the job, but he was one of the primary investigators. I said, I'd love to do this story with you. Nobody's ever done it. It's a really fascinating story. It's really timely right now. And he's like, I'd love to do it with you too, Greg, but my department's probably not going to, bless that. So I wrote a letter to his chief, and his chief turned around and said, absolutely, go ahead, you can have it all. So I was like, hell yeah, we've got the body cam from the cops that got shot. We have all the 911s, all the victim information, everything that you could ever want to tell a really, gritty, true crime documentary about this guy who lost his fucking shit.
And you haven't done it yet. Is that correct?
We're working on it right now. So
okay,
we're
good.
My whole idea was to kind of do it as a podcast, and then people kind of intervened and said, well, if you're going to do that, we might as well shoot a documentary at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Well, the hell with that. We can do it as a podcast right now. Come on, tell us about this story. We've got here. Look at this microphone.
We've got about 15 minutes left here. So man, break it down.
Yeah. Tell us about this story.
Okay. So this Christopher Dorner. He was on the job. He was an ex-Navy guy, and he'd been deployed. He was relatively decorated, but you know how accolades are. You join the service, join the police department, you're going to get ribbons. You don't really have to do a lot, and all of a sudden you're a decorated guy.
True.
And so he was a decorated guy. Yeah. And so he got on the job, and he was really struggling. As a matter of fact, in the academy, he had to be recycled. And what that means is, like, you're not passing muster. Go get your shit together and then come back and we'll give you another shot at it. And so that's what happened. And he ultimately gets through the academy and gets on the job. He's a rookie, a boot, and he begins his training. Well, midway through that, he gets deployed because he's a reserve. So he ends up leaving for a long time, going over and doing some, reserve duties, during combat time, and gets some specialized training. and then he comes back on the job. Now, remember, when you're a rookie, you do 1 year probation and then you're a cop. Well, and this guy has actually been on the job for much longer than that, but he got interrupted because of his service, and he came back and he's got to continue his training. And he ends up with this female training officer, and they get a radio call of a vagrant, probably 5150 mentally ill type of person. They go over there, the guy's uncooperative, they have to put him on the ground and take him into custody and do a 5150 evaluation on him. So during this little physical confrontation with the guy, in order to get him under control and get him arrested, the claim that Dorner would ultimately make is that his training officer, this female officer, had actually kicked the suspect in the head and was used excessive force. But he never says this when it happens. What ends up happening is that his training officer, the female, is criticizing his skills during his training evaluations, going, hey, he doesn't read and write well, there's communication skills, I don't think he's not passing muster, he's not to the point where he can go out and operate on his own. He needs to, it's unsatisfactory. So he's getting poor training evaluations. And once he gets those poor training evaluations, that's when he comes back and says, hey, this is just, retaliation. She did something wrong. I now want to report it. So this whole story evolves because he was getting unsatisfactory remarks on his performance. So that leads to what we call an IA and, internal affairs, and the whole investigative process happens. Well, they find out that they determine during this process that he lied, that he made untruthful statements, and they fire him.
Let me cut you off there, Greg.
Is that a gig, Leo?
No, that's not a gig. Well, it actually could be, but a false allegation. And I'm going to mention this here yet again.
You got a book coming out.
I've actually got a book coming out next month about real stories called Breaking Blue, Real Stories of Officers Falsely Accused. And it's dead serious. Comes out June 15th. And
it's a coloring book. You'll enjoy it.
You can make the cops any color you want.
Yeah, there you go.
It's fucking fantastic. It's a beautiful color.
So I
love that. That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's
got paper dolls.
Paper dolls too. You can cut them out and string them across.
Put cheerleading outfits on.
So and just I'm just going to follow up on you saying that these type of BS allegations, man, that come out there, and within the department they are a rarity, but they do happen, specifically in situations like that. So anyways, go back on. Sorry. Yeah, so he feels that I'm going to tell this story from both their perspectives. The department's perspective is that you lied, you're misrepresenting the facts, there's witnesses there saying that they watched the whole thing, she never kicked the guy. And now you're claiming this after the fact. Why didn't you report it immediately? All these things that obviously come up during that process. And for Christopher Dorner, he's like, no, this is just, they're trying to get rid of me, blah, blah, blah. Pulls the race card and ultimately gets fired. And then he spends the next almost 5 years through the civil process of getting his job back. And he just keeps getting met with more and more defeats, man. He's not gonna win this one. And which goes to show how strong the case ultimately was, is that, it's a civil case. Most of the times they'd have been like, yeah, this poor kid, put him back on the job, give him a break. But he couldn't get back on. So he becomes a used car dealer out in Vegas. And then when he realizes that his last ditch effort to get reinstated on the police department is gone, he then makes the decision that he's going to take it upon himself to retaliate against everybody. He writes a manifesto, he posts it online, he sends it to Anderson Cooper. He's going all in. So
can I interrupt for a second though?
Yes, sir.
His training officer said that he didn't read and write very well. So I'm sure that manifesto had some errors, correct?
It's online. You can read it.
Okay, good enough.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, there's some comprehension issues if it wasn't, he didn't have an editor.
Oh, okay. All right. Absolutely. That's good to have an editor. What an op-ed piece for the New York Times, for sure.
So he goes on this shooting rampage, and the first person that he targets, there's a captain in our department named Randy Kwan, who was also a lawyer. Randy Kwan represented him. He was his advocate during these hearings. He was his advocate, his border rights hearings, trying to get him reinstated, trying to argue his point. So because he failed at that, and Christopher Dorner didn't get his job back, he targets Captain Wong, but instead of, particularly targeting him, he goes and finds Wong's daughter and her husband.
What a shit bag.
That's horrible.
And he executes them in a parking lot in cold blood. He just walks up and kills them both. Yeah. So he walks up and kills both of them. And then it's on, blood's been spilled. He's all in and there's no turning back. And he decides that he's just going to go until he can't go anymore. And he continues on this rampage. He encounters a Riverside County cop who's looking over at him. And he thinks that the cops made him because all this is now out in the news. And he's posted his manifesto. There's dead people, there's warrants, the marshals, everybody in the world's looking for him. And he sees a Riverside County cop, and the Riverside County cop's just driving down the street and just happens to look over. And Dorner's like, oh man, must be looking at me. And takes his rifle out of the window, executes that Riverside County deputy.
Jesus.
Kills him right there in cold blood. As a matter of fact, there's a taxi driver, witnesses it, runs over to the officer's vehicle and is trying to use his own communication device to get help. He's like, hey, you got an officer shot here who can't talk. And then he goes down to San Diego. He attempts to steal a boat because now he's going to flee to Mexico. And he probably unintentionally loses his badge and his ID and his wallet down there, which is later found, which places him there. And he tries to abscond a boat. He takes an owner of a boat down in a marina, ties him up, and he says, hey, I'm sorry, dude, this ain't about you, but I'm taking your boat. You can pick it up in Mexico in a few days. So he's like, whatever. Well,
he's really thought this out, huh?
He really thought this. It gets even better. So Dorner doesn't realize that most of the time boats are tethered to the dock. And
oh shit. So not only was he not a good author,
he did not know about knots.
He was not a captain. He was not a yachtsman.
Knots what you think it is.
I think I said that he was in the Navy, right?
Yeah.
Oh. This gets better.
So he obviously tries to pull away. The ropes all get caught up in the rudders and in the props, and he realizes that this is in vain. So he abandons that plan and ultimately flees up into the mountains of San Bernardino
and steals a hang glider, right?
He flees up into the mountains of San Bernardino and abducts. He pulls somebody over at gunpoint and steals their truck, and then ends up going to an occupied residence and holding some people hostage, and then ultimately leaves. He goes to another cabin that's unoccupied. And this manhunt's it's narrowing down. And ultimately a deputy gets a call that, hey, that stolen car just went by. It's around the corner. So the deputy comes around the corner with his partner, and they're trying to figure out where the cop is. And as they pull up and they're just still trying to figure out what's going on, boom, a deputy takes a shot to the head from a rifle. So he's put himself unwittingly into a kill zone. There's a cabin there where Dorner's taken up refuge. He's armed. He's got all kinds of, ammo and guns, and he sets up shop inside of a cabin. He executes the first responding officer, and now the whole world is converging upon this cabin in Big Bear. SWAT teams from 3 or 4 different agencies are heading up there. Helicopters. It's a dead of winter, snow everywhere, which, as us California cops
don't do well with it.
Navigate. We're like, what are we doing here? So Yeah, so SWAT gets there and this massive firefight starts, and they're just exchanging rounds back and forth and back and forth, and they're just dumping rounds in, and he's throwing rounds out. And ultimately, the house catches on fire. I don't know if they sent in an incendiary device or something. The cabin catches on fire, and he takes refuge in the basement because now, obviously heat rises. He thinks his last stand is going to be in the basement. Once he realizes that all hope is lost, puts his gun in his mouth and calls it a day.
And how many people did he end up killing?
He ended up killing 5.
Jeez. And 2 of them were a wife and a daughter.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how he started, because he couldn't
a
make
wife
it
and no, I'm sorry. A young lady and her fiance, no kids.
God,
wow,
that's awful.
And that was the daughter of the, what'd you say, captain?
The captain that was representing him, who was fighting for his job.
So this guy, so Dorner basically had the entire southern portion of California, law enforcement wise, out looking for him during this time period.
Absolutely.
He ends up in Big Bear. From San Diego to Big Bear, that's a drive.
Yeah, he's from San Diego. Well, from LA to San Diego to Big Bear. He's all over the place. He intended to go to Mexico, but
couldn't
he
drive
didn't know how to. He couldn't drive the boat.
Well, I know that I'm going to bring this up because you didn't bring it up, and I know he's talked about a lot, but I'm going to talk about it because I want to talk about it because I think that I'm just curious. I want to know.
We only got a few minutes.
Hold on. I know. Hold on.
Okay.
So were Tupac and Biggie, were they beefing or were they not beefing? I just want to know that. Was it East Coast, West Coast, or what's going on?
Yeah, so it was an ups and it was a roller coaster. There was absolutely a beef going on. It wasn't East Coast, West Coast. It was one rap label from the East Coast and one rap label from the West Coast that were at odds. You had the CEOs, Suge Knight and Puffy Combs at odds. You had the rappers, Tupac and Biggie at odds, and then you had their affiliate gangs, the Crips and the Bloods at odds. So there was 3 levels of conflict that was just continuing to exacerbating itself every time that they get around each other. Puffy Combs' bodyguard had shot and killed Suge Knight's bodyguard in Atlanta. Obviously Tupac's out there bragging about banging Biggie's wife, and all this shit was just fueling the fire until Vegas happened, and one of the Southside Crips that was affiliated with Bad Boy Records got into a fight with Tupac, came back later, shot and killed him. Suge Knight, who was in the car next to Tupac, decides, well, okay, that's all right. You can do that. And then he retaliates and has Biggie killed in the same fashion.
Yeah, let me ask you this real quick before we do bounce out of here. But NYPD, they have, did you just crack a beer?
Can I is this showing up?
No.
We can't see it. You got to put it up in front of us. It sounded like I heard the IPA. Very nice. No, I could hear. I know the sound of a beer opening, and I just heard that. But NYPD,
I wanted you to pay special recognition to the name. It's called the Expatriate.
Expatriate. Quite lovely.
We're still patriots.
We've actually
what does that mean? I don't even get that term. What's an expatriate?
So an expat means somebody that's living in a country that's not their own. So if you say, hey, I'm going to go to Thailand and retire, you're an expat. So and there's a group of Americans that will hang out there. Why I know this is,
he was trying to be an expatriate and go to Mexico.
Yeah, but he couldn't untie a boat.
Didn't pull it off.
I can't believe he didn't untie the boat. He's not very bright. He can't read or write or untie a boat.
That's it. No, but NYPD, they actually have, and I don't remember the exact term of their unit, that they have got an investigative unit there that all they basically focus on are crimes within the rap industry that take place there in New York. All the violence that goes on with them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did you guys have something like that there in LA as well?
No, we didn't. But we collaborated with those guys. A guy named Eric Henderson, who was one of the DEA agents that oversaw that unit. He gave us all their files, and there was a guy named Derek Parker who was NYPD. He was the hip hop cop. And so we stayed, we were all working together in order to try to make sense out of all of this. But on the West Coast, we didn't have that. We didn't have anybody that, was spending their hours trying to, monitor you know,
rap concerts and stuff, you know, things like that. Yeah.
We just didn't do that.
Well, Howard, what you think, man? This is our first guy from the West Coast here.
Okay, so here's what I think.
Way.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Next time we need popcorn, because I could sit here and listen to him talk all day.
No, I absolutely. Or we have him back another time, man. If Greg, you're willing to do that, we may circle back around and bring you on another time.
I'm bringing popcorn though. I don't like butter on it though. Well, butter's horrible on popcorn.
No, you got.
I agree with you, sir.
No,
yeah, it's like
I agree with you.
It is. It's too greasy.
It is.
Really, you need a snap of the popcorn. It's bad. Yeah. Bad form.
My wife makes soup out of popcorn.
So soup we get with all that butter.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, that's nasty.
Man, so you're retired now. Before we let you get out of here, you got to plug anything you're doing these days for earning a paycheck, or anybody wants to reach out to you for anything? I'm looking forward. Hey, this podcast, or not this podcast, this documentary, man. That's something that I look forward to seeing for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going all in with that. I think it's an important story. It's timely, and we need to, collectively, we need to turn the tide. And we all know that law enforcement's a big ebb and flow roller coaster thing. We're heroes one day, zeros the next.
Yep.
But it's time to turn the tide, man. I'm just sick and tired of this bullshit.
You and me both. And
that's kind of way to do this podcast. So
yep,
we can talk to people and hear their stories, man. I mean, it humanizes police officers. When you talked about that guy targeting his daughter,
mm-hmm.
Man, that breaks my heart. I mean, catch that motherfucker.
Yeah.
Catch him, put him in jail. We need that. Cops are doing a good service to folks.
It'll turn, just like you said. It will. It's definitely a valley right now, but it will turn. Well, Greg, brother, cheers to you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. This has been a lot of fun, man.
This is still that terrible
burning chair. Don't buy a burning chair, folks.
Yeah, if anybody's looking for a bottle of burning chair, it's going to be set outside our building tonight when we leave. You can pick it up. Anyways, man, appreciate you being on here. Pleasure talking with you. Take care, buddy.
All right, thanks.
You guys too, man. I appreciate you both, man.